So with it being around about a month and a half until Final Fantasy VII Remake comes out, hopefully without any further delays, it's actually going to come out in April, but we'll see. I wanted to talk about my story behind Final Fantasy VII and what I did when I was a child in order to play this game. Pretty much, it's one of my favorite games of all time, and the remake that's coming out very, very soon, I'm ridiculously hyped for it. And I did want to be, but because it looks so good from all the trailers that have come out and the gameplay they've shown off, to look at it what it was 20 plus so years ago and look at it now through the trailers that have been released, you can't help but get excited, especially if you really, really loved Final Fantasy VII back in the 90s. I'm sure many people have various different stories about how they played Final Fantasy VII, how much it changed their lives once they played it, and how it changed their view on video games, and how it just kind of changed the perspective of how we, looked at video games in the future, especially with RPGs and Japanese RPGs, what happened after Final Fantasy VII. But there's a whole other topics or another time for that. This is about the story of how Dan came to be in the possession of Final Fantasy VII, and then the aftermath afterwards made it so that he would never, ever be the same again. This is 100% a true story. So let's take you back to young Dan. Dan when he was about 10 years old when I actually started playing Final Fantasy VII. I think I was around about that time. And in case you haven't noticed or haven't picked up from my accent, I have a slight, I know it's really hard, but I have a slight Irish accent. My accent nowadays is the most confusing thing in the world. Some people think I'm Canadian, some people think I'm American, some people think I'm British, some people think they don't really get it when they hear my voice now. But back then, when I was about 10 years old, I lived in Ireland for a good 6 years then, and I grew up in England, moved to Ireland when I was about 4 years old. So I had a neighbour who was pretty much the nearest kind of house to me, and there was a family of people living there, and their son, who was about the same age as me, we kind of got along, and we used to play football together, and we used to do all sorts of stuff. Anyway, we were both into video games at this time. We're about 10 years old. I just came off finishing my first ever PlayStation 1 game. I was so amazed by it, and the first PlayStation 1 game I ever played was Metal Gear Solid. To this day, it's still my favourite game of all time because I shouldn't have played that game when I was young, because for lots of reasons, but either way. I just came off playing that. I think it was about a 6-month gap. Now, when I played Final Fantasy VII came out in 1997. I think it was about 1999. So it's already been out. Everyone's kind of played it by this time. I had no idea what Final Fantasy VII was at all. I didn't even know what Final Fantasy was, what the series was. My neighbour, one day I go over to his house, and we're playing, I think he had a GameCube at this time. We were playing like Mario, and this is what we normally do. Like, I wasn't huge into games, but I would play like casually. So I'd play like Mario Kart on his GameCube or play Super Smash Brothers or something like that. But I was never into games like I was, today. I was sort of just like, wow, Metal Gear Solid was amazing. But for some reason, I sort of just didn't go for, wow, there must be more out there. I sort of just stopped playing. So I'm over at his house, and he basically says to me that he got a bunch of games for Christmas. And they're all a bunch of PlayStation 1 games. Gran Turismo, there was Rayman, there was, I think, Driver or Driver 2 at this point. There was a bunch of games he had. One of the games he had a thing that said Final Fantasy VII, and I was so in awe of it because it had 3 discs. When I opened it up, it was like it's double the size of the normal kind of CD case that you get for the PlayStation 1. It had 3 discs in it. And he said to me he never played that game, or actually no, he said to me he played it, but he said it sucks. He basically said it's rubbish. You don't actually get to move. It's just like selecting text. It's really boring. You won't like it at all. So he had all these games, and he pretty much said to me, you can borrow them. I'm going on holiday. you might as well borrow them because I'm not going to be able to bring my PlayStation 1 with me. You can try them out. I know you've only got one game, which he knew I had, was Metal Gear Solid, which he thought was crap as well, which goes on to tell you later on the line how he viewed video games and how I kind of viewed them in a way. So he told me to take all these games. He'd be gone for about 2 weeks. And yeah, I could play them, so it was really nice of him. I take all these games home and I start playing them. I got really into Rayman, really into Driver, got into Gran Turismo, got into all these games. Like, you know, I played them for about a couple of hours and I was like going through them one by one. And I get to Final Fantasy VII's case and I kind of look at it and I think, well, he said it's boring, but I'm really intrigued by this whole 3-disc thing. I don't think I ever saw something that was more than, you know, a disc. I think the only thing I saw was Driver 2, but that was 2 discs, if I remember correctly. So I stick the disc in, start it up, and the intro plays. And my first thought after watching the opening kind of CGI cutscene was, wow. I was in complete awe of that opening. That opening to me is still incredibly, not important, but it's just implanted in my head that I just remember it so much because it's something that as soon as I saw it, I immediately went, holy crap, this looks amazing. Very, very quick. I do want to say that I'm not going to go into kind of spoilers in case you haven't played Final Fantasy VII, like just to be aware of that. But I will at the end of this video because there's a second part to this video where I need to talk about what happened after I finished the game, and I need to go and reference some things that happened in Final Fantasy VII. So after an hour, I'm very confused by this game. Like after the big CGI opening, I'm going, whoa, this looks amazing. The majority of the game seems to be, well, I couldn't get over the fact that I couldn't move. Like, so it was a turn-based game, obviously Final Fantasy VII is a turn-based strategy game. I couldn't get over the fact that I couldn't move my character, and I just had to select attack or magic or anything else. I also got bored of reading all the text, and I didn't like that it was turning into a book. I think that my initial thoughts were like, this seems like it's a lot of work for what it is for like a video game. I don't really think I'm going to enjoy it, but I stuck with it for an hour and I couldn't get past the opening mission from the bombing mission with the Scorpion. If you remember that, pretty much everyone knows that. It's just, there's a boss battle at the end of the bombing mission, very first mission, where you battle a giant scorpion. And I couldn't beat it. And I tried and tried, and it frustrated the hell out of me, and I just couldn't beat it. And I think later down the line, I actually learned this, because this was an actual thing, is that the English translation during that boss battle was really bad. Barrett or someone, or Cloud, someone says, attack the scorpion while his tail is up. So I see this, and I immediately start hitting the scorpion and stuff, and I end up dying all the time. And what ends up being, years later, is that was a bad English translation. It was actually meant to say, don't attack while his tail is up. You're actually just meant to defend yourself. Which, it wasn't my fault, and that was just a critical error. I guess this is a reason why old games are so different, because in modern days, you could just easily patch that out in like a few minutes and get that sent to everyone who owns the game. Back in the old days, you pretty much, you shipped it and that's what you got, and you really had to make sure that the game was finished, or else you'd get a lot of angry people pretty much. So I keep getting frustrated with this boss battle, I can't get past it. And I immediately give up on it because I'm like, this game sucks. It's got the hardest boss battle of all time. It's just text and all this kind of stuff, and it doesn't seem cool besides the like opening CGI. I'm not sure I like it. I think my friend was right. So I put it away. It's about a week until my friend comes back. And I played all the other games. And I kind of liked them. Like all the other games that he gave me, I pretty much enjoyed them. I thought they were really good. But there was something about Final Fantasy that even though I played the first level and I couldn't even finish it, there was something about the way that game worked. It was very different to everything I was accustomed to, you know? It was a turn-based RPG game where it was a lot about numbers and it was a lot about stats and trying to get combinations right and thinking about how you're going to approach battling someone rather than just go in all guns blazing. And you actually have to think a lot more, and I found myself thinking a lot when I was playing that game. And there seemed to be some interest in the characters. I thought they were quite interesting. I was always interested in Barrett because he had a gun on his arm, and I thought, why did he have a gun on his arm? And there was some intrigue by that whole story because I never had like an in-depth story besides Metal Gear start off that way. But Metal Gear Solid didn't even... I mean, it did, but Metal Gear Solid was more confusing to me. It was more a case of Metal Gear Solid's opening was like, here's a bunch of data, and me going, okay, let's play the game. But Final Fantasy, it was kind of like, I understand. This is making sense to my 10-year-old brain. Interesting. So with a week to go until my friend comes back, I decide to give it a go again. And I just decide to go, right, I'm going to beat this stupid scorpion once and for all. And after many, many attempts, I did. I killed it, and the elation was ecstatic. I thought I'd beaten the game. I was so happy, and I spent like forever trying to beat that thing, and I just managed to do it. I remember this very vividly, is that the night I beat the boss, I was meant to go to school the next day, and I beat the scorpion on the first level, and because I beat him, I was like, oh my god, I could actually play this game. And I remember playing that game from about 8 p.m. to about 3 in the morning. I was hooked big time. There's something about hanging out with a group of Avalanche and every character being so different from one another, and them having their own agendas and past and things they have to talk about that, you know, this is how they got to this stage in their lives, and, you know, they're struggling with certain things. And it just felt like, oh my god, this is like, I'm dealing with real issues here in people's lives. And for a 10-year-old me to kind of really understand that, obviously I couldn't grasp a lot of things, but it made me feel like this was something different. This was a game that was trying to attempt to do something different. And it was something that was really trying to focus on characters and making them more meaningful in video games. So getting back to the story and everything that was going on in my life. So I'm playing Final Fantasy VII for a week and non-stop, pretty much every night. I'm absolutely in love with this game. So a week passes, my friend comes back, and he goes to collect all his games that he borrowed from me. And he's asking me, oh, which ones did I like? Which ones are your favorites? All that kind of stuff. And he immediately points out on Driver and went, yeah, this one's my favorite. And part of me is thinking, oh god, do I tell him that Final Fantasy VII is my favorite out of this lot and risk losing my possibly only friend since we're in the middle of nowhere? Or do I just pussy it out and just say, yeah, Driver was great, it's my favorite? So I pussied out and said Driver was my favorite, even though I played that for only about 2 hours. And at this point, secretly, I'd played Final Fantasy VII for about 30-40 hours. So, in a week. So yeah, I spent pretty much every bit of the day playing Final Fantasy VII once I cracked the first boss. So here came the problem. When you're young, you don't have a job. You can't really just go out and buy stuff. And immediately after giving back all those games to my friend, because of course they were his, I had to give them back, I was like, I really need to get Final Fantasy VII. Like, now. I need to finish that fucking game. That game is doing something to me, that I need to know my friends, Aerith, I need to know what's happening with her and Barrett and Tifa. I need to know. To me, they became my friends, which is the odd thing, is that I became so used to hanging out with them in game that they became, in a weird, sad way, they were my friends. So I had no money to get Final Fantasy VII. They were expensive games, obviously. My birthday was really far away, so was Christmas. I couldn't ask for it then. So I had no way of getting Final Fantasy VII. One thing I do want to mention that I did mention before, it's quite important. When I played Final Fantasy VII for the first time, I didn't have a memory card because it was kind of the first time I got PlayStation 1. My parents didn't even know really that you needed a memory card to save games. You know, that kind of stuff. So what I tend to do, or what I would normally do to get around this, is to secretly keep my console on the whole time. So even when I went to school, I'd come back and the console's still on, just paused, I could carry on playing it. My console was probably on for a period of about 5 full days, I think. How my PlayStation 1 survived, I do not know, but that's how I played Final Fantasy VII. So really, I thought to myself, I had no way of getting Final Fantasy VII, and there was just one thing I had to do to really get it back. So, now please don't judge me for this. I was very young, and as I explained the story, I got quite obsessed with this game to the point where at the end, I'm cringing even wanting to talk about it. But either way, I'm going to tell the story as it happened. So one day, I'm over at my friend's house. Again, we're just playing games. We're playing GameCube stuff. We're playing Mario Kart 2-player kind of stuff. And he goes to the toilet at some point. And at this point, I immediately kind of kick into gear and start looking around for this case. And I'm like, where the hell is it? It's not on where he normally keeps his games. It's not on the table anywhere. It's not on any chair. It's nowhere in his room, pretty much. And at one point, I look underneath his bed, and those stacks of games that he gave me, they were all under there. And right under there, right at the bottom of the pile, was Final Fantasy VII. And I go to grab it, and I put it in my jacket, and I hide it. I wait for him to come back, and an hour later, I leave there, and I hope he doesn't notice that I stole his game. Like, to me, there was two kind of cases I had. One was like, he may not even notice it's gone, and B, he didn't even like it anyway, so why should he have it? Why would he care, if I stole it or not? So my first entry into my criminal career began at age 10. I've stolen Final Fantasy VII, and I'm bringing it home that night, and I'm like, I'm so excited to play it again. And at this point, I remember that memory cards are quite important. And this is the point where I was like, I really, really need a memory card. Because as soon as I put the disc in and everything, it just said new game, couldn't use continue, and I immediately remembered, oh yeah, those memory card things save your game. The first option was to obviously leave my console on forever, but I think someone would accidentally turn it off in the house, or someone would just see that it's been on for ages, or it's like, at this point, generating heat because it was most likely on for a week beforehand. And I really couldn't get memory cards because memory cards were quite expensive as well. They were around about the same price as games, just about, I think, back in these days. They were really, really expensive for like a really small memory card. That's just the way they were back then. So getting a memory card was as hard as actually asking for a new game. So there was no way I could get a new memory card because they were just that expensive. And this is the part of the story where it gets really bad, and I really hate my 10-year-old self. But again, it's a different time. It was the place I grew up in, it was sort of just kind of like, who gives a shit kind of attitude. It was very, it's not the way it was, today. So my plan was this time is to steal my friend's memory card so I could play the stolen Final Fantasy. So now my new plan was to steal my neighbor, my good friend's memory card so I could play the stolen copy of Final Fantasy VII on my PlayStation. That was the only thing I owned, was the PlayStation, I think, hopefully. But yeah, I was going to steal his memory card. Now, he only had one, which made this tricky because if his memory card goes missing, he's going to know it's missing. So what do I do? When I basically got into his house and, you know, I didn't break in, I played video games or did something with him, play football or something. And I got into his room and I found the memory card inside his PlayStation 1. So I take it out. And then this part was very improvised, but it kind of, you know, I had reasons for it. Please don't judge my 10-year-old self. I don't know what I was doing. I got a bit of cardboard and I basically shoved it into the memory card slot. And it was kind of grey, which was kind of the same color as a PlayStation memory card. And I thought by pushing this bit of cardboard into the memory card slot, he would not notice that his memory card was gone. He certainly would fucking notice if he started playing the games and realised all his saves were missing and then go to reach his memory card and find there was cardboard there. Oh god, what have I done? This was 20 years ago and I've already feel bad about this. So yeah, I took his memory card and replaced it with a cardboard cutout that kind of looked like a memory card, but not really. I take his memory card, head back home, I boot up the PlayStation, I replay what I just played of Final Fantasy VII. I get through the whole of disc 1, I get to disc 2. A lot of heartbreak in between, which I'll go into at the end of the video, and I finished it. And it became one of my favourite games of all time, and still is to this day. So, what happened with the memory card and the stolen copy of Final Fantasy VII? Well, so basically, I actually ended up playing the whole game, like finishing the whole thing without him noticing. Because it turns out that all those PS1 games that he lent to me, that was his whole collection. And if you may remember previously in the story, all his collection was underneath the bed. So in actual fact, he didn't even give a shit about the PlayStation at all. It was just sat there doing nothing. And he didn't even notice until about 4 months later, when mysteriously a copy of Final Fantasy VII and the memory card appeared on his doorstep. And he never knew it was me. And that's how I got to play Final Fantasy VII. By stealing. Don't do it, kids. Please don't steal. Please don't do what I did. It was very silly, but I mean, in the end, I gave it back to him, and I pretty much had an unforgettable experience, and don't I deserve that? So the aftermath of this story is what happened to me mentally with Final Fantasy VII. Now, this is the part where I'm going to say giant spoilers for Final Fantasy VII. If you have not played Final Fantasy VII, do not watch this bit, because I'm going to go into detail about what happened in the game and how it affected me emotionally afterwards. It was the first time a game made me feel like real deep care for characters, like never before. Like for actual pixelated characters, I really fucking care about these people and what happens to them. So, when Aerith died, she was one of my favourite characters. I kind of took a liking to Tifa at the very start of Final Fantasy VII because I thought she was badass. But as the game progressed, I sort of had like a kind of fondness for Aerith as time went on, and that's kind of how good that game was. Is that it didn't really force anyone down your neck when it said, "Who do you like more?" It was kind of like open-ended. In fact, you could like have multiple things going on with different characters depending on what you did in that game, which is mind-blowing if you think about it, back in 1997 that you could do that. And it's just a game that was so ahead of its time, especially in story and narrative and character. It was just, no one was expecting what Final Fantasy VII was going to bring to the table, including me. Because when Aerith died, I got really upset. I missed school the next day when she died because I couldn't get over it. I couldn't get over it. Why would a character die? I was used to death in games. Like I said, the 10-year-old me was used to death in games from playing Metal Gear Solid. But the people who died in that were like government officials, I mean, the only one that really got to me was Sniper Wolf, and she was technically a boss character and was evil, but still that scene where she dies really fucking got to me. But this one, Final Fantasy VII, kind of took it up in a completely new direction. There was so many things it was focusing on, and it was just more about people's feelings and how they feel, and people's friendships and relationships growing together in this game. And then when Aerith suddenly dies, I mean, it's to this day probably one of the biggest shocks in video game history, but to me, I couldn't get over it. I got so upset that the next day or the day, a few days after, I had a giant, like pretty much the backyard was just like an open backyard, so it was just like a giant field. Ireland, there you go. And I remember kind of walking down this kind of open-ended garden, and at the very end, I planted a little cross, and I put it in the ground and said Aerith on it. And I had a little fear. Oh, okay, right. So I remember going down to the end of the garden, putting a little cross in the ground, and I said Aerith on it, and I had a little funeral for my made-up video game character. I was so sad. I was really upset. Like, I really got to me. It was just one of those things where you just... Probably my first like video game, first twist in life, let's put it that way, was that death. And I just did not handle it, especially as 10 years old. Again, probably shouldn't have played that game because it really would get to you if you were 10 years old, but yeah. First JRPG I ever played, first RPG I ever played, this first tactical game I played, first game that really focused on characters and story and narrative and just really get you into these characters and learn their backstory, which is complicated and convoluted, and there's conspiracy around it, and it's just who is this person, who are they really, and just so many different twists and turns in Final Fantasy VII that it was one of the most memorable experiences I've ever had in my life playing that video game, especially with the circumstances around it of how I had to play it, which I just explained to you. And then the aftermath of me burying my fake, pretend digital girlfriend of Aerith in a garden in Ireland because I was so sad she died. And that is my Final Fantasy VII story. Thank you very much if you watched all the way to the very end. I may do more of these in the future. I've got a couple of stories to talk about. I guess I could do, if you want me to do more of these stories, just something different from doing reviews all the time on this channel. And please let me know in the comments. Like this video, the more likes I get, the more I kind of understand if people like this kind of content and stuff. And do check out for more reviews if you're looking for those. I've got plenty coming up. And also, if you're very new here, do check out my other channel called Different Level. We're just about to release a new video game documentary, and we make video game documentaries over there and high produced stuff. Over here, it's all cool, chatting about video game debts and how to steal video game copies from your friends. Just different casual format over here. So if you want to go for something a bit more professional, go with a Different Level. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, guys. I shall see you next time. Bye bye.